This is Shelley Kraft coming to you live on SNN.Live. We're coming to you from the Dawson James Securities Small Cap Growth Conference 2019 here in Jupiter, Florida. With me today is Dr. Lindsay Rosenwald, Fortress Biotech. It's a publicly traded company and the symbol is FBIO. Lindsay, welcome to SNN.Live.
Thanks, Shelley. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for getting together, and it's great to be at Dawson James.
Good to have you. Let's get started with a brief overview of the company, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So we're a life sciences company. We really are two companies in one. We're a revenue-driven, cash flow growing specialty pharma business in the dermatology space, and we're also a development stage company with 14 or 15 clinical stage programs and another 10 or so preclinical programs. That's about, in a nutshell, what we do.
Now, let's get some history behind the company.
Sure. So my background is a biotech life science entrepreneur. Started lots of companies, know the area very well, understand the value of development stage medicines. I also understand that it's a very inefficient market, that you can find lots of high quality clinical stage medicines that are available on very reasonable terms that are worth a lot more after we get a hold of them and either add some value or just extract the value. So like I said, that's one part of the business, and my history has mostly been in that space. But secondly, we recruited some very bright people out of Medicis Pharmaceuticals when they were sold a few years ago for $2.5 billion to Bausch Health. And we're building a dermatology specialty pharma business that's growing very rapidly.
So what would you say is your competitive advantage?
Well, I think probably there's a few, but one for sure is we've invested a great deal of time, money, and training. We have approximately a dozen full-time, mostly MDs and PhDs who no longer want to practice medicine or no longer want to sit at the bench and play around with flasks and test tubes and want to get into the business of developing new pharmaceutical and biotech products. So that is my competitive advantage, is having people like that, having the ability to source the right people, train them the right way, and they only have one job: to find drugs that are already on the market that we can get at a huge discount to net present value and add it to our sales force, currently in dermatology, but we expect to be in other spaces in the not too distant future, hopefully. And the other part of the business is looking for clinical stage medicines that have data that says to us and our outside and internal advisors that the drug probably does work, that addresses an unmet medical need that we can do very well for ourselves and our shareholders and patients.
How do you find the landscape in this area?
Well, there's probably between $200 and $300 billion a year in research and development in the life sciences. That goes from the very biggest companies like Johnson & Johnson and Roche and Novartis, all the way down to little community colleges in China and India. There is a huge ecosystem. There's a huge growth in the ability to find new targets for drugs, create new drugs to go after those targets. It's an incredibly inefficient market. So you can find a drug today that you might be able to buy very cheaply and turn around and develop it and generate a huge valuation out of that product.
What would you say is the size of the addressable markets, the addressable target markets for some of your products?
Sure. So, good question. If you look at our pain drug and intravenous formulation of tramadol, one of the most widely prescribed drugs in America as a pill, this is the IV version. Estimates go from $500 million a year to well over $1 billion a year. If you look at our drug for AL amyloidosis, which we've partnered with Alexion Pharmaceuticals, that could run into the multiple billions of dollars a year. If you look at our disease drug gene therapy for bubble boy disease, that's a smaller number of patients, but probably still is in the $100 to $400 million a year range. We've got another 23 programs, and I can't tell you exactly about all of them right now, but I don't want everybody to fall
We'll make
asleep.
this a 2-hour.
Yes. But you get the point. There's a lot of drug candidates in the clinic. We certainly expect to file for approval this year for our intravenous tramadol, and there's a lot of programs. So one of the advantages about Fortress is that we're not reliant on any one program. And we think that gives us a huge competitive advantage to other, one-product biotech companies.
So in other words, you're diversified across a lot of different diseases too, right?
Yes. So most biotech and pharmaceutical development companies, they focus in specific therapeutic categories, and they limit their sourcing to those categories. Our take is different than everybody else that I've ever heard of. We're looking for drugs that are in the clinic that look like they work, that we can acquire on reasonable terms that address large or meaningful unmet medical needs, unmet medical markets. So I don't care what area it's in. We have traumatic brain injury, we have antivirals, we have pain, we have lots in oncology and cancer. Anywhere where the drug looks like it works, where we believe we can develop it, get it to the market, and get a good return on the investment and a good return for the patients, we're on board.
Now, you're a public company, so only tell me what you can versus press releases, et cetera. What are some growth drivers going forward?
So there's a bunch of growth drivers. First of all, as I said, we have a specialty pharmaceutical business. We launched in 2017, our first full year. We did $13 million in sales. Last year we did $23 million. It looks like this year we should do approximately $30 million. We're continuing that growth rate, we believe, and hopefully will accelerate in a couple of years. So that's one thing, is quarterly sales growth. Then when you look at all of the drugs in development, 8 late-stage drugs and another 7, I think, earlier-stage drugs. As I said, this year we expect to file for approval for our intravenous tramadol. Next year we expect to have lots of data readouts on different programs, perhaps other partnerships announced, perhaps additional filings and new acquisitions, new licenses.
Lindsay, let's get your website out for our investor audience, if you would.
Sure. Our website is fortressbiotech.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lindsay Rosenwald, Fortress Biotech. It's a publicly traded company on NASDAQ. Symbol is FBIO. I'm Shelley Kraft. This is SNN.Live, coming to you live from the Dawson James Securities Small Cap Growth Conference 2019 here in Jupiter, Florida. Lindsay, it's always good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
You're looking well. Thanks so much.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye-bye.